of Lincoln's assassination is a detail that you might have missed. The pictures show the fatally wounded Lincoln being held by his wife, as well as John Wilkes Booth jumping from the luxury box to the stage. However, despite Lincoln having been shot, Booth is often seen holding a dagger as he leaps from the stage. This is because of the other person in the scene who is so often overlooked, Major Henry Rathbone. Rathbone and his fiancée Clara had been personally invited to come to the theatre that night, and following the assassination, the Major sprung into action to apprehend Booth. Booth stabbed Rathbone's arm, allowing him to escape, but Rathbone never recovered from the guilt. His mental health deteriorated until, in a fit of madness, he murdered Clara before stabbing himself 5 times. Rathbone survived his wounds and was charged with murder, but he was declared insane and spent the rest of his life in an asylum. History's shortest war. In 1890, Zanzibar became a British protectorate. Part of the deal was that any future sultans should first receive British approval before ascending to the throne. On August 23, 1896, the pro-British Sultan Hamad bin Thawani died under suspicious circumstances. Sultan Khalid bin Barash succeeded him that day, but he had not requested British approval before doing so. The preferred British successor was Hamad bin Mohammed, who was much more amenable to British interests. Because Sultan Khalid had acted without permission, it was deemed an act of war. The British issued an ultimatum for Khalid to vacate the palace by 9 a.m. on August 27th, while their navy closed in the location. Khalid refused to vacate and rallied his troops to the palace, barricading themselves inside. At 9:02, the British opened fire on the palace, setting it aflame. By 9:46, the war ended, with Khalid fleeing to the German consulate for asylum. The war lasted less than 45 minutes, with 500 Zanzibari casualties and only 1 British soldier being injured. Sultan Hamad was installed as the leader of a Khalid government controlled by the British, marking the end of Zanzibar as a sovereign state. Senator Incitatus. Roman Emperor Gaius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula, had a reputation of being a madman and deviant. But there was one thing he loved above all else, and that was his favourite horse, Incitatus. Incitatus lived in a marble stable, ate from an ivory manger, and was adorned entirely in purple, the colour of royalty. The horse even had 18 servants, just for himself, to wait on his every need. There is even a tale that Caligula planned on making him a senator. While some suggest this is evidence of Caligula's insanity, many scholars agree that the treatment of Incitatus in general, as well as Caligula's desire to name him a senator, was an elaborate way to ridicule members of the Senate. He was known for his perverse sense of humour, and it is believed that Caligula only made the claim to convey the notion that even a horse could do a better job than the senators did. Unfortunately, we'll never know if Caligula was actually planning to follow through on this joke or not. He was assassinated before he had the chance to give his horse promotion. Castro's incredible longevity. Assassinations of head of states have been all too common throughout human history, but there have been far more failed attempts than successful ones, and these can sometimes have the exact opposite effect than what's intended. Obviously, the intended effect would be to kill the person and remove them from power, but a failed assassination can make the leader in question far more popular, almost godlike to the populace. Failed attempts also tend to result in a bit of paranoia from the intended target, or at the very least a greater abundance of caution, making future attempts more difficult. But there is no person known to have ever suffered more assassination attempts than Fidel Castro. According to a 2006 statement from Fabian Escalante, Cuba's former chief of counterintelligence, Castro survived 634 attempts in his life. While it wouldn't be unheard of for somebody in a position like that to overstate the number, there's a good chance this number is pretty close to accurate. The CIA is known to have attempted to take down Castro countless times, both through assassination and via political means, and every attempt failed. In Castro's own words, "If surviving assassination attempts were an Olympic event, I would win the gold medal." Oliver Sewell. And speaking of assassination attempts, you would likely assume that anybody that was personally responsible for preventing an assassination would be celebrated as a hero, but that was not the case for Oliver Sewell. Sewell was a decorated former US Marine and disabled veteran who was part of a 3,000-person crowd that assembled to see President Gerald Ford outside of a San Francisco hotel. President Ford was about 40 feet away when the woman next to Sewell, Sarah Jane Moore, pulled out a revolver and opened fire. The first bullet barely missed, and Sewell immediately tackled her to the ground. She got off a second shot, but it ricocheted against the ground and struck a bystander instead of the president, thanks to Sewell's fast action. The man received fine, and at first it seemed that Sewell was a hero. However, while he was not out to his family or co-workers, he was known as a member of San Francisco's gay community. He requested that the papers keep his sexual orientation off the record, but activists, most notably Harvey Milk, decided that the opportunity to showcase a gay hero was too good to pass up, even if Sewell really didn't want to be recognized recognise it as such. He wound up being disowned by his family, never received a commendation or invitation to the White House, and turned to alcohol to fight the depression the entire ordeal caused. Oliver Sipple died alone at the age of 47, and his body remained in his apartment for 10 days before finally being discovered. Religion may predate agriculture. Humans began as nomadic hunter-gatherer societies. It was long believed that the development of agriculture and its creation of permanent settlements gave rise to writing, arts, and religion. While religions may have existed in the form of oral traditions before cities were built, nomads certainly wouldn't have built any places of worship. It didn't make sense for nomadic tribes to build large temples for worship if they were going to be constantly on the move, and yet that may have actually been the case. The 1994 discovery of the Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey called this entire notion of agriculture predating religion into question. The temple was built in roughly 9,500 BC, centuries before agriculture began in the region. To give a frame of reference for exactly how old that is, Cleopatra may have lived closer to the moon landing than to the building of the Great Pyramids, but those pyramids were built closer to the moon landing than they were to Göbekli Tepe's construction. The evolution of society in different regions followed different paths, so this doesn't mean that temples of worship being built for agriculture was developed as the norm across the world. However, it does call into question our assumption about prehistoric events and the order in which they should have logically transpired. Ernest Hemingway's unfortunate air travel. We've all experienced bouts of bad luck, but Ernest Hemingway's luck, while on a sightseeing tour of Uganda with his fourth wife, Mary, boarded on the Congo. They were flying aboard a small Cessna when the plane clipped a telegraph wire, causing it to crash into the shores of the Nile. Anyway, Mary and the pilot all survived, and they camped out for the night. The next morning, they were spotted by a tourist boat, which carried them back to town. Following the Cessna's crash, a new plane had been sent to carry the three survivors out of Uganda. They boarded the plane and took off to head home, but almost immediately after taking off, the plane crashed and caught fire. That's 2 plane crashes in less than 24 hours that these three had endured. The pilot was able to pick out the window, and he and Mary escaped through it, but Hemingway was too fat to fit through the window. Instead, he had to break open the door to the plane. For reasons unknown, he chose to break the door open with his head. Once again, they all survived, but Hemingway was never the same. It is believed he suffered from chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the disorder that American football players get from having too many concussions. Hemingway may not have been a professional athlete, but this was no less his 9th severe concussion in his life. The cadaver synod. They say that dead men tell no tales, but that does not mean that they can't be put on the witness stand. Following the death of Pope Formosus, he was succeeded by Pope Boniface VI. However, his time as Pope was cut short, possibly by disease or possibly by intervention from his successor, Pope Stephen VI. Now, Stephen had a bone to pick with Formosus. 7 months after the former Pope had been interred, Stephen ordered his body to be dug up and brought to the papal court. There, Formosus was put on trial for perjury and for serving as a bishop despite being a layman, among other alleged crimes. He was, unsurprisingly, found guilty, with Pope Stephen nullifying Formosus's reign as Pope. He cut 3 fingers off the cadaver that were used to perform blessings, thus negating any acts performed by the prior Pope, and the body was then buried in the graveyard of Florence. Still not satisfied, Formosus was again dug up and thrown into the Tiber River. Unsurprisingly, this public spectacle turned popular opinion against Stephen. He was imprisoned shortly after the previous Pope was done to the Tiber, and Pope Stephen was strangled to death while behind bars. The results of the cadaver synod were nullified and an official rule was put in place to prevent putting a corpse on trial in the papal court. The Champawat tiger. While the average person would stand little to no chance in unarmed combat against an adult tiger, they fortunately don't think of people as food. Tiger attacks are rare unless they feel threatened or are extremely hungry. And the Champawat tiger was absolutely starving. Her natural habitat had been destroyed to make room for farmland and to be used as timber, and these sudden changes caused most of the smaller animals to migrate elsewhere. Those that remained quickly found their numbers dwindling thanks to human poaching. All out of options, the Champawat tiger had no other source of food than humans. Her attacks began in the village of Rapal in Nepal. The Nepalese army was called in to deal with the man-eating tiger, but they were unable to capture or kill her. However, they did manage to drive her across the Shava River, so she was India's problem. The tiger's reign of terror continued as it attacked villages across the Kamaran districts. Hunting strategies also evolved to evade human capture, with the tiger often travelling 20 miles under the cover of darkness to attack different villages than when she was last seen. It took nearly 10 years before she was finally taken down by British hunter Jim Corbett in 1907, by which time she was already believed to have killed and eaten 436 people. President Tyler's lineage. Take a moment to think about your grandparents and some of the things that they might have lived through. They may have experienced things like the Great Depression and World War II, but for at least one man, the story goes back much further than that.